Lucy from Sew Essential, and today I'm sharing some of my favourite dart sewing tips. Darts are a really important part of many garments because they give it shape and they're often very visible as well, so it's a good idea to get them looking as professional as possible. One of the things you're trying to avoid is a bubble at the point of the dart, and lots of patterns suggest tying a knot there to avoid that, but I've got some really cool tips today that mean you don't have to tie a knot but you will secure the dart. So I'll start by showing you that, and then I'm going to show you some of the other little tips I've got as well. Everything I mentioned today is available on our website, and I'll pop links to our website and the products I mentioned below. And if you've got any dart sewing tips that you want to share with everybody, please pop those in the comments below as well. If you like what you see today, please like and subscribe, because every Friday we bring you a video packed full of sewing goodness. So before I show you the sewing technique, I thought I'd just show you how I like to mark darts on the fabric. So you can see here we've got the two dart legs, and you'll get a little point on each of the dart legs and then the dart point that you need to mark onto your fabric. And there's a number of different ways of doing this. My preferred method usually is to insert a pin through the centre of those little points, which will show me where I need to mark the fabric, and then I just lift the pattern tissue up, and I've already marked these, the ones on this side. I just lift the tissue up. I just use my Chaco pen then to do a little cross and mark those points on the fabric on this side, and also at the bottom there. I think I've done that one. Let's just double check. Yes, I have. Yep, so that's all marked. And then I'm working with a double layer of fabric as you normally would. So then I just look at the other side of the fabric and mark the dart in the same way. I like these little Chaco pen liners because I think they give you a little bit more accuracy. Let's just mark that the dart point there. So I like to do that, and then I can see where I need to create the dart. You might not want to use tailor's chalk though, you might not want to mark your fabric, and I think you've got to take into account the type of fabric, the colour of fabric. If you don't want to do that, the other alternative method you've got is to create what's called a tailor's tack. And where those little circles are, instead of putting a chalk mark, you can take a sewing needle, a hand sewing needle with a double thickness of thread, and if you just sew a stitch from one side to the other of that little circle and pull your thread through, don't pull it all the way through, leave some nice long tails at the end, and then you sew from the bottom of the circle to the top of the circle in the same way, and again leave some good long thread ends there and here on the needle, and then you can just snip the loop and snip your needle off. And if you look on the other side, you can see there's a little stitch there denoting the point that I want to use as my marker. And then if I just lift gently, I can lift the pattern piece off, leaving those threads in place. And then when I come to separate the two layers of fabric, I can just do that gently, and when I get to about halfway I can just snip those threads, and you've got the point marked there with your thread. So that's just an alternative way of doing it if you don't want to mark the fabric. So I'll just remove the rest of the pattern tissue now, and then I'm going to prepare the dart for sewing. And again, you can mark this with tailor's chalk if you want to, if you want real accuracy, if you want a guide when you're sewing. That's a personal preference and that's up to you. Some people just like to use their pins to mark where the dart needs to be sewn. I'm just going to pull those threads out because I don't need those, because I've got my Chaco pen markings there. As I say, you need to just sort of consider the colour of the fabric and everything. You might not want to use blue tailor's chalk on a yellow fabric like this. You might want to use white, for example, but you know, I'm doing this for the purposes of the video. I'm going to use a contrasting thread as well to make everything really clear for you guys. So you would take the dart off, take the fabric, top layer of fabric off, sorry. So my right side is this side, my wrong side I've made the markings on. And then you always sew from the end where the dart legs are, the two dart legs are, to the point. So you want to pin, you want to put your pin through the first cross and then push it through the one on the other side like so, and that will get everything to line up properly, because you want those 2 points bang on top of each other for accuracy. So position that first, and then you want to position the dart point, and you can put a little pin across at the end there if you want to, just to denote where the end of the dart is and where that dart point is. And as I say, you can either use pins to create the line, or if you wanted to, if you're a beginner and you know you might find it a little bit easier, you could get a ruler and you could actually make some markings to line everything up so you can see exactly where you've got to stitch when you're doing it, and then you can use those as well to position your pins. And you want to position your pins going up towards the dart legs, because when you put the fabric on your sewing machine you're going to be wanting to sew in that direction. So just pin like so, and you're always sewing to the dart point. So there we are, we're ready now to take that across to the sewing machine and sew the dart and show you my little trick. So here we've got the pinned dart, and I'm just going to place that under the foot of my sewing machine, and we're going to start by back stitching and sewing through those points that I've marked where the dart legs were marked on the fabric. So back stitch at the top to secure everything, and then start sewing towards your dart point using a standard length stitch. For this cotton it's probably 2.5, and I'm just going to sew through those markings that I made. Take your time if you're a beginner, you know, there's no rush, you can go nice and easy with this just till you get your confidence up. You could always practice on a scrap of fabric first as well, my mantra. And as we approach the dart point, I'm going to slow down a little bit, because this is where the little trick comes in to avoid tying knots. So when I get to about 1/4 inch away, I'm going to shorten my stitch length to 1, and those last few stitches to the point I'm going to sew in stitch length 1, and I'm going to sew the last few stitches along the fold of the fabric, which is actually enough really to secure that dart without tying any knots. However, if you want to be super confident, you can raise the foot, move the fabric towards you, and then secure with a back stitch and a forward stitch in the dart seam allowance, and therefore you don't have to tie a knot. Your dart is secured and you won't have any bubbles at the end of that dart. It works a treat. Another little tip I wanted to show you was how to get good results when you're sewing darts on thick and bulky fabrics like this leather look skirt that I sewed. It had darts on the back and the front, which you can see here. And when I first sewed them, they were looking really bulky, they wouldn't sit flat. So there's a couple of little tips that I used to get these nice, smooth, flat darts. So the first thing, if we look at the inside of the skirt, is that you can actually snip down the seam allowance of the dart to open it, so that you're not having to press the dart together, but you can press it open, and I'll show you how to do that. The other thing that I did to get good results on this dart was that I top stitched either side of the dart, probably about 1/8 inch away, and that's a great little tip for if you're sewing with things like faux leather or even perhaps heavy wool fabrics. If you're coat making, this can work really well, just doing some nice neat top stitching either side of the dart. So let me just show you here how I would do that. I've got a piece of cotton fabric, which I wouldn't normally do this technique with, but if you just snip to the stitching line about a quarter, half an inch away from the dart point, because obviously you can't snip all the way to the dart point because you might run the risk of actually opening your dart then, and you don't want to do that. But if you do that, that will allow you then to cut down the centre of the dart seam allowance. And I'm doing this a bit awkwardly because I'm on a video, so bear with me. But I can snip down now to that point where I've cut across the dart to the stitching line, and then that will allow me to open the dart out. The little bit at the end, you just press it to one side, but the majority of the dart then you can open out and you can press flat, and that will reduce the bulk massively and give you much better results. And then if you wanted to, once you'd done that, you could go to the right side of the fabric and you could top stitch either side of the dart like I did with the leather look skirt. The other thing that's absolutely crucial is pressing darts properly. So I always like to use a tailor's ham for this task, and these are absolutely invaluable for all pressing on your dressmaking projects. They allow you to really get to the right point with your pressing. They're curved on the top and you can stand them up, you can manoeuvre them round and manoeuvre your garment onto the edges of it, or hang it whichever way. You might put a sleeve head over the end of it, for example, but it just allows you to get really good results when you're pressing. So when I press a dart, obviously this is the opened out one, but I'm just using this as an example, but I just position the dart firstly flat on the tailor's ham like so, and then I give that a press, because that just melds the stitches. And then I open the fabric out and I use the curve of the ham to position my dart so that it sits nicely when I come to press it. And then I just press it to one side, making sure that I'm pressing along the stitching line, and then at the end here, get a good press. And using a tailor's ham will help you to get lovely, neat results like that. The other thing to mention when pressing darts is you might be worried that pressing the dart flat like so, you might end up with a bit of a mark on your fabric from where the fabric's being pressed. If that's the case and you're worried about getting shine or anything like that, which can happen, just take a piece of card or a piece of paper and just slip it under the dart, then press it. And you'll prevent that from happening. You'll prevent that shine from appearing on the fabric, but you'll still get the same great results. So I hope you enjoyed those tips and you found them helpful. If you want to know about raising or lowering bust darts, I've also done a video on that technique, and I've also done a video on a small bust adjustment as well, which you might find useful. So I'll pop the links to those below as well. And as always, if you like what you see today, please like and subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.